In the first episode, we traced the Hendon Files from the Wet'suwet'en blockades to the 2021 federal election. We saw how Ontario's Intelligence Bureau tracked dissent shifting from rail lines to lockdown protests, and how it identified the rise of the Patriot movement. Now we move on into 2020, the year of the Convoy. Remember to like, subscribe, and share, please. On January 15th, the federal vaccine requirement for truckers crossing the border took effect. In the days leading up to it, Ottawa sent mixed signals. The Canada Border Services Agency briefly suggested Canadian truckers might be exempt before the government corrected itself. But for the movement, Hendon was tracking it didn't matter. Plans continued, the border mandate wasn't just a policy, it was a symbol. The Hendon report of January 13th spelled it out. Individuals within the Patriot movement were mobilizing from across the country to arrive in Ottawa for a mass anti-government protest. Analysts noted that demands were sweeping, the repeal of all mandates, and that there was no exit plan once protesters arrived. But they also added a crucial line: there was no specific credible threat, and no intelligence to suggest an armed insurrection was imminent. This balance, warning of disruption but cautioning against exaggeration along with heavily politicized issues, became Hendon's hallmark in the lead-up to the convoy. 5 days later, on January 20th, the assessment sharpened. Hendon Strategic Intelligence Overview concluded that the Freedom Convoy 2022, also called Operation Bear Hug, would almost certainly disrupt the movement of vehicles and goods, and could target ports of entry. It warned that some participants might try to block Parliament or government buildings, and again underscored that there was no exit strategy. The report also tracked the convoy's fundraising. Between January 19th and the morning of the 20th, the GoFundMe total jumped from $400,000 to more than $500,000. That kind of growth, Hendon said, was a better indicator of real support than the varying headcounts circulating on social media. And in a candid email circulated the same day, the OPP Intelligence Superintendent Pat Morris described the movement not as a master plan, but as an aggregate of intentions. A wide array of individuals with different motives, united only by frustration and opposition to government policy. That evening, Hendon announced a partner call for the next morning, January 21. When that call took place, Hendon effectively shifted gears. From that point forward, intelligence reporting and teleconferences would run daily. A provincial unit created in 2020 in response to heightened protest was now functioning as the national intelligence hub for Canada's largest protest in decades. By the weekend of January 22, the trucks had begun to roll. Western convoys departed from Prince Rupert and Vancouver, gathering in Calgary before pressing east. Local news followed their progress. Cameras capturing lines of tractor-trailers punctuated with placards and Canadian flags. On social media, the numbers swelled with every retelling. Tens of thousands were said to be on the move. Hendon watched through its daily reports, remained skeptical. Inflated estimates were thrust into social media. What mattered was headcount, fundraising, and intent. An unknown amount of vehicles and people were converging on the capital. Inside the OPP, however, the strain of the movement was evident. An internal email circulated the same day concerning GoFundMe freezing what was now a $4 million campaign. The superintendent, Pat Morris, wrote, quote, "Hey Matt, this is interesting for current and future consideration. We explored the possibility of seizing funds in relation to the MMO event, wherein the money was to be utilized to defend clearly criminal activity in excess of 55 arrests, I believe. It involved theft, vandalism against public property, and critical infrastructure, as well as assaults. But the answer we received was that the account was in keeping with GoFundMe's parameters. This is an interesting development. Pat." End quote. In this case, GoFundMe was proactively suspending the Freedom Convoy protest funds, where they refused police requests to seize funds where violence, destruction, and mass arrests were present. He continues, quote, "I am exceedingly concerned about the politicization of the application of the law in cases such as this," end quote, in relation to the approach to the funding. By Jan 26, an OPP intelligence email noted that approximately 830 vehicles were in the motion, of which about 200 were private cars and pickups. On January 27th, Hendon's situation report noted large numbers of roadside supporters providing food, cash, and supplies. In one incident, a Quebec man reported himself to police for intending to travel armed. His weapons were seized, but no charges were laid. Hendon confirmed that 2 pieces of heavy equipment were traveling with the Western convoy, and that participants were using the walkie-talkie app Zello for coordination. By Jan 28, trucks established themselves on Wellington Street in front of Parliament and along Ottawa's outskirts. Hendon meetings now daily until further notice. The Provincial Bureau was now functioning as the country's intelligence backbone for the largest protest Canada had seen in decades, which would also lead to the largest police mobilization in Canadian history. In the next part, we will see the bulk of the Hendon Files during the multiple weeks of protest, and evidence of politicians pressuring police to crack down on protesters. These files are dozens of the 7,000 we examined to bring you a full picture of the COVID protests in Canada, culminating in the Freedom Convoy and Emergencies Act. We've created a book, Shadow Over Canada, Canadian COVID Protests, to document this. Join in next time for the continuation of this story.